All right, welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back. So, now that we've talked about stress and we've talked about our brains, we've talked about what the solution is, right? A little bit around creating trust, relationships, how to set up those environments is what we need to talk about next. So let's start briefly. How many people have heard of PBIS, multi-tiered system of support, and seen this pyramid? RTI pyramid, right? Like this is about 20 years old, 25 years old. So in education, you've seen this idea. So I'm going to like first give you some visuals, then we're going to back it up about how this got started. But essentially, this group of professors from the University of Oregon in the special education department, in response to some things that were happening in schools, came up with a multi-tiered system of support, or PBIS or RTI. These things mean the same. So these buzzwords that you've heard, it used to be called response to intervention, RTI. That was more the academic side of things. Then PBIS, positive behavior support, that was the pyramid for behaviors. And now we combine them and we call them multi-tiered system of support. So RTI and PBIS get married and their child is MTSS. So that's like the simplest way to think about it. What they did is they borrowed from public health and they looked at tier 1. 80 to 90% of students are going to respond to general teaching, like kind of just great instruction, first instruction, basic, instruction, how to behave and how to read and how all that. That all happens. About 80 to 90% of kids are going to respond. 10 to 15% of kids are going to need some extra reteaching, small group tutoring, stuff like that. 3 to 5% of kids are going to need intensive direct support. So if you think about your special ed population, they kind of fit up there in tier 3, usually for academics at least. And what this, and I'm going to build out kind of what these things could look like for you. So in tier 1, you're looking at school-wide PBIS implementation, which we're going to talk about today. Some sort of social emotional learning for students, second step, things like that. Teaching kids about empathy, problem solving, emotion management. That all happens at tier 1. All students. At tier 2, you start having like more like small group interventions, like small group tutoring or small group counseling sessions, self-management systems like check-in, check-out, behavior contracts, stuff like that, mentoring, and some classroom accommodations. And then at tier 3, you start getting much more individualized. So individual counseling or a wraparound or a functional behavior assessment, a behavior support plan. So all of those things are divided up. So when you hear people say PBIS doesn't work, the response is, you're right, tier 1 doesn't work for everyone, right? At times, for some, we need to layer on interventions. That's the PBIS model or the MTSS model. So the answer is yes, you're right, and that means that there's kids we need to do more for. Our goal today is really to just talk about tier 1, because research shows that if you spend most of your energy on tier 1, then you will be able to manage the tier 2, tier 3 needs. If you spend all of your energy reacting to problems, you're going to be buried all the time. You'll have way more behavior problems, way more issues if you spend all your time. But that's typically what schools are doing. They're just reacting to all the crises and more crises all the time, rather than building systems that would prevent those things from occurring in the first place for the most part. No matter what you do, you will have kids with tier 2 and tier 3 needs though, but you can reduce them in number. If you know that 10% of kids are going to have conduct problems, that's what the research tells us. So in a class of 30, 3 kids will drive you crazy every year, right? And about 17% of kids have mental health issues. So ADHD, bipolar disorder, depression, and particularly like adolescents. Around 15 is the sweet spot, 15 years old, for lowest level of serotonin in their brain, the more irritability and depression happens. So those of you with 15-year-olds at home, raise your hand. I have one. That's a low point, actually. So those of you teaching adolescents, it's hard for a neurological reason. That's why it's hard. right? They're not feeling so good, even if the best circumstances, even without being having a lot of risk factors, okay? And we know that about 8% of kids account for most of your office discipline referrals. You already know who they are. If you were to turn to each other right now, you could list off your 8%, right? You could. Smile, wink. We all know who they are. So my question to you is, if we know statistically this is true, and if you know this is true in your experience, why is it that every year we act surprised? Why do we act like, hey, these 3 kids are driving me crazy, right? Like why do we act like shocked? It's every year the same. We know why they act like that, right? We've seen the risk path. We know that that it's going to be like that. Yet we're shocked, and we talk about it in the staff room, and we get mad at our administrator for not supporting us, right? When we know that they're coming every year, they're coming to us like that, and there's not a lot that a principal can do from their office, to fix that. So think about that. Like, what we need to be doing is setting up an environment where we're prepared for this. That's all we're saying with PBIS. Like, and what does evidence show? What does the research show that actually would help? Right? So just like putting kids' names on the board does not help. To just like write down the list of who those 10% are. Okay, so now we have a list. That doesn't help. So we need actual interventions. We need to actually know what to do. So punitive consequences, just to kind of like wrap it up here, it's going to reduce motivation of students. It's not going to teach appropriate behavior. So when we say they should learn, they need to learn. Well, as research would show, excluding kids, which is generally what we do in the Western world for discipline, is we just kick them out of school or the class. They don't learn new appropriate behaviors, so they're not learning. It increases truancy, dropout, vandalism, and aggression. There's actually not much evidence that there's long-term effect on behavior. In fact, usually behavior gets worse. And it harms the school community because the kids around you are saying, you can't handle this. Like, you guys don't know what to do with this kid, right? And then they think, well, it could happen to me, and it makes them feel unsafe. So I don't know about you, but being in education for 25 years, I was a school social worker and a school district administrator. I did not have time to do things that didn't work. Turn to your partner and say, I don't have time to do things that don't work. And here's the truth. You can't punish kids into being good. It just doesn't work. And every time we try, the kid that's not being good is the kid on that bicycle dealing with trauma. Every time we try to punish a kid into being good, it's as though we're throwing gasoline on a fire. The house is already burning down, and we're contributing to it. And we have essentially in education contributed to what we call the school to prison pipeline. We have contributed to the continuing of racism in our society. Not that we mean to, but we have things like disproportional discipline that are brought out by implicit bias, which is increased by stress, right? We have vulnerable decision points. There's a lot of research around that. The more punitive we get, the more that we are doing things that we don't want to do in society. We got into this business because all the things you listed, right? I imagine it was things about giving back, changing the world, right? I got into education for basically, I feel it's a social justice issue, right? We can change the world to make it better. So knowing this, we can't punish kids into being good. We have all kinds of options. I want you to turn to your partner, and I want you to do some reflection. Now, we've talked about ACEs, we've talked about trauma in the brain. I want you to think about, how did it make you feel as a teacher and as a human being? And then name one thing that you would want to rethink in your own classroom if you're a teacher, or in your school, in response to the science that you've just learned about. Okay, so I want you to have a discussion together about that. Okay, let's come on back. Let's take some share outs. What came up in your discussion? Anything that came up for you as a teacher, as a human being, things you might want to change? What came up for you guys?
Shawswick wrote in the chat, if a teacher is upset, it can make students upset. There is a time where students can tell a teacher is upset even when they try and stay calm. It could be as little as a change in voice or a nonverbal cue.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to take that deep breath, check yourself. And I do think kids read that. And do you know it's okay for you to have a genuine emotion? It's all right. It's allowed. You can have feelings. You're a teacher, administrator, and the key is really to be honest with your students, but in a really kind of restorative way of like, it's okay to say that made me really sad, or I feel frustrated right now, and then to model, but I'm going to take some deep breaths. Or, okay, class, what can we do to make this better? And not react in your rage or your anger, and to apologize when you make mistakes. Think of it this way. If you have kids who are on that bicycle and dealing with trauma and stress, they may never have seen an adult model emotion well. They may have never seen an adult get angry and calm themselves down and not abuse people or yell. So it is a tall order when you become an educator that you have a chance to create trust by undoing things that kids have seen. So it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be sad or disappointed. It's what you do with it, and model for the kids that you're taking your deep breaths, that you need a minute. It's okay, you know? And having strategies of knowing what to do, I think, is one of the best ways to go with that. So let's talk about that. What are some things to do? So the good news is really PBIS offers to you some options of what we can do, research-based interventions. So I'm going to show you a quick 5-minute video about what PBIS is. And this is available on YouTube, so you're welcome to show this video just independently to your staffs. Here we go. This is what it is, 5 minutes or less. So the other day, a friend of mine asked me, what is PBIS in 5 minutes or less? So here you go. So what's PBIS? PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. It's also called PBS, and it's probably the most widely used school climate and behavior program in the world because it reduces problem behavior and increases student and teacher well-being. It moves the school from being punitive to more positive. The reason you want to use school-wide PBIS is that it prevents problem behavior in the first place so that we can help kids and teachers build better relationships and we can increase learning. Often a school will see a 60% reduction in problem behavior in just the first year. PBIS is a framework developed by researchers from the University of Oregon, and they studied what works in school and classroom discipline. Where were the safest schools and where were the best classrooms? What did they all have in common? And what they came up with was basically a list of what to do. PBIS is not a program or a kit that you can just buy. It's actually just a list of best practices that lead to safe, positive schools with happy kids and teachers. On the list, you'll find these 4 important components. First, establish school-wide expectations. Next, teach the school-wide expectations directly and regularly to the students. Next, create a positive reinforcement system for your school. And then, respond to challenging behavior with consistent consequences. So the first thing you do is you establish school-wide expectations to create a consistent system across the school. Research shows that we need to narrow these down to just 3 to 5 in order for them to be memorable. The expectations you choose should target all forms of behavior, and the most common example is be safe, be respectful, be responsible, maybe be kind. And then you define what those values will look like in action by explicitly describing the guidelines for every setting in your school. How do you want kids to behave in the bathrooms, in the hallways, in classrooms? And when we make the rules and the expectations, we state them positively. So it's better to say, keep your hands and your feet to yourself, than it is to say, don't hit. And that's because research shows we're more likely to comply with do requests than don't requests. So when we say walk please, we're telling students exactly what we expect. The next thing to do is to teach the expectations directly to the students. Ideally, you'd have more in-depth teaching at the beginning of the year and after winter and spring breaks, like a rules roundabout, and then you follow up with weekly review lessons throughout the year. The very best way to teach something is on location, taught by the staff member who's going to be there to monitor the kids. So the librarian teaches the library lesson, the yard supervisor teaches the playground lesson. Another great way to teach students is through classroom circles, particularly for expectations and rules that kids have a lot of opinions and emotions about, like cell phones. Circles help students feel like they're part of a decision-making process, that they helped create the rules, so they're more likely to follow them, they understand them. And the more consistent that staff are, the less stressful the school environment is, because teachers are more predictable and less reactive. Then, after students know what's expected of them, create a positive reinforcement system for your school. Most schools, you'll see a ticket system with lots of verbal praise to reinforce the positive behaviors. We should strive for 4 positive comments to every correction, or 4 to 1. What's really important to remember is that when you teach an expectation, be ready to give lots of positive praise when kids are doing the newly learned appropriate behavior. That's how we get the new behaviors to stick. We use positive reinforcement systems because the research shows you get more of the behavior you pay attention to. And then respond to challenging behavior with consistent consequences that are restorative and teaching in nature. When kids don't demonstrate the right behaviors, give useful corrections, provide a lot of practice, and instead of sending kids away with suspensions and detentions, you want to provide interventions and support to help them change their behavior. Use restorative practices so they can accept responsibility and repair harm and restore relationships. School-wide PBIS is about first coming to agreements as staff. What are the expectations in our school? And then we teach those expectations regularly and in different ways. We offer lots of praise and we create a positive reinforcement system for our schools. And when students make mistakes, we give useful corrections. We give opportunities to practice in order to build the culture we want. Research shows that effective behavioral expectations make schools safer, and it makes kids and staff happier because they create a culture of consistency and positivity. For more on how to implement PBIS at your school, go to lauramooiman.com. Okay, so remember at the beginning we were talking about stress, and imagine a school where behavior's under control, right? That was one of the big stressors for folks, was student behavior. Imagine having excellent school climate, because that's what's going to happen when you do PBIS. And then adults end up getting along better because they're less stressed out. We don't need all the autonomy we thought we needed because we like our colleagues. Like, a lot of things happen. Less workload because things are smooth. You're not putting out fires all the time. You can build a system at your school that makes things less stressful for you and for the kids. So remember, we've been talking, PBIS is a 3-tiered model, and all we're talking about right now is tier 1. We're only talking about establishing expectations, teaching them to the kids, having a system of positive reinforcement, and then how to respond when they misbehave, right? So research is, typically takes schools at least a year to implement these 4 things. So that's your work. That's the work that's cut out for you this year. We're not going to dive into tier 2 and tier 3, though as we do individual coaching with your sites, I can help you with those things. Like, kind of in the meantime, what do I do with these kids? Absolutely, I can help you. You will get much more bang for your buck if you start with tier 1. Besides, you're already working on tier 2 and tier 3, and it's driving you crazy. You need to get these systems set up that's going to help everyone first, or you're going to spend a lot more time, a lot more money, and not going to get the results. So in the last little bit, let's just talk a little more in depth about what each of these things are, because you're the leadership team at your school. This is the work set out before you to accomplish this year. And here we are, it's November, so we're already a bit through. So be thinking about some of these things. You're going to put a pin in it, and you're not going to be able to accomplish this year, and that's okay, as long as you know the work that's set out for you and why it's important to do. And I want you to have the tools you need to actually get the work done. Okay, so the very first step, establishing expectations. So what we're talking about here is very common in schools. Are the adults all have different ideas of what should be happening, right? You have situations where some people allow cell phones in their classroom. Some people allow eating in their classroom. Kids aren't supposed to sit on top of the tabletops outside, but you'll see 3 staff members walk by and not say anything, and then the 4th person says, "Get down from there," right? This is really a common situation for kids. Or a kid could be like violating the dress code and no one says anything to them until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So what do kids think? This inconsistency, kids perceive it as incompetence. They do. They think you all don't have your act together, and they're right. And if you are a kid who's experienced trauma or adverse childhood experiences, this inconsistency, it's reactive and it's frightening because I never know when I'm going to get yelled at by these people. School feels unsafe to me. And it's not fair. It's not fair to your colleagues that are trying to uphold a standard while the other people are like, I don't agree with the rule, so I'm not going to do it. What you need to do as a staff is you need to come together and have meaningful discussions about what are the expectations at our school. And even if you don't love it, you agree to support it because you support your colleagues. And you realize that by me not supporting this expectation, I'm making their lives harder. Because what are the chances of supporting? I would think cell phone is in middle and high school is one of the perfect examples that if you have teachers that are allowing that in their class and other people that are trying to make it stop, their chances are probably zero because of what other people are allowing. Now you can get around that if the expectation is cell phones are allowed by teacher permission only. So if that teacher says, everyone get out your phone, you're going to use it as a calculator right now, everyone get out your phone and Google this information. As long as it's teacher permission. Otherwise, that's how to get around some of that rules. But really, we're talking about consistency. You want to reduce reactive responses. You want to be consistent and predictable for students. That lowers teacher stress and it lowers kid stress. And the only way to do that is if everyone knows what the expectations are. You cannot just assume that people know. How do you onboard new teachers? How do they know what the rules are at your school? So effective behavioral expectations should be positively stated, right? So we say walk in the hallways, don't say don't run, and that has to do with cognitive load. For people, when you say don't do this, don't do that, they actually have to translate what you mean, and kids particularly. If you say don't run, they hear run. And then they say don't, they hear don't, and then they see that you look mad, and then they have to oh, I guess I should walk. Just tell them what you want. So it's not just that saying be safe, be respectful, be responsible is warm and fuzzy and it's PBIS. There's actually science behind telling kids what you expect. You're more likely to get that behavior. You should post them all over your school. Those are other moments of opportunity to teach. So you need basically marketing campaigns. You need to teach these behaviors 10 to 20 times a year. That's the research. And I'm not saying 10 to 20 times. I'm saying bathroom behavior 10 to 20 times. Hallway behavior 10 to 20 times. And if you say they should know by now, because they're in 7th grade, you're wrong. They don't. If they're not doing it, they don't know. It's not been taught enough. There's all kinds of cool research about this where, if you've heard about the big hand washing campaign they did at Cedars-Sinai's hospital to try to eliminate hospital infections, they actually had to do teaching and positive reinforcement to surgeons and doctors to get them to wash their hands. It's really cool studies, okay? And I have it in some of my videos that I'll share with you. So the most educated people in our world and the most, they not only were they the most educated, but they should be pretty motivated to not kill people with infections, right? Because that's their life's work. 60% rates of washing their hands until they went through these campaigns of teaching and positive reinforcement. So next time someone says a kid should know by now, I don't have to teach it, I shouldn't have to give positive tickets, think back and just say we're teachers, so we're going to approach all these things with teaching first. And it's not true. And there's also a reason, if you think about, have you seen kindergartners walk in line? Hands to their side, facing forward, smiles on their faces. And by the 4th grade, they're whipping, backpacks in the air and hitting each other. What's the difference? Does a 4th grader have less self-control than a 5-year-old? Less school experience than a 5-year-old? No. The difference is the way the teachers handle it. Kindergarten teachers teach behavior probably every 60 seconds, right? That's why they have better behavior. All students need to be taught behaviors, not just some, and all behaviors need to echo your school-wide values like safe, respectful, responsible, something like that. Now that'll be a job that you need to work on with your teams. So coming up with what are our big kind of overarching values. The most common are safe, respectful, responsible, but maybe you have a slogan like you're the Panthers and you're going to have PAWS and PAWS stands for something. Whatever. There's a lot of different options of how you can be creative or not creative, but bottom line is you need to pick at least a few. Safety needs to be one of them because there's always going to be stuff you need to describe as safe, and have at least one rule that talks about how we treat each other, like kind or respectful, something that talks about more than just the rule, but that human interaction of how we expect people to interact. Then, and this is kind of your work for the year laid out for you, is you need to define them on this matrix. And this is in your handout, and I have examples for elementary, middle, and high school of what other schools have developed. This is like the heart or the backbone of what you're going to develop for your school. It organizes your rules into, classrooms, hallways, bathrooms, cafeteria, bus area, library. How do we show safety, respect, and kindness in each of these areas? So, for example, in bathrooms, we show safety by keeping the water in the sink, right? Maybe it's 2 pumps of soap. You got to be pretty granular when you teach these things to the kids. We show respect by not peeking around the stalls, right? We respect people's privacy. We show kindness by, letting people go first. And there's all kinds of ways that you can show. Maybe you show responsibility by in the bathroom by doing my business and returning to class as quickly as possible. All these examples are in your handout, so you don't have to recreate the wheel. I would advise those of you that want to kind of get things moving along is look at the elementary, middle, or high expectation matrix that I provided to you and offer it to your team to maybe edit. Say this wouldn't work, but this would work. You also can pull lots of this stuff online. So you need to kind of create what do we think would work at our school. This is the foundation for how we want things to go. And then you post it around your school. Now, if you see in this picture, this is, a big splash, right? I do not recommend posting this matrix in your school because no one will read it. What I do recommend is, as you can see, they have some posters here. It's like, Wilson Wildcats. It says cafeteria, restroom, hallway. This is the picture on the upper right. Really try to get targeted about what these look like in each area of your school. You don't have to buy posters either. One thing you could do is just simply take pictures of students doing these behaviors, put the 3 bullet points of mainly what you want them to do in the hallways. You have pictures of kids like lining up appropriately, and then you're saying hands on feet to self, quiet voices, like just the big 3 things. Post those all over your school. Separate poster for bathroom, it's different ones for hallways, different ones for the office. How do you want the library procedures to go? What should classrooms look like? And these things are a visible kind of reminder of our values and how we interact. And it really helps. And this is what the researchers found was a common thread in schools that had good behavior, is they had these things posted. So like this, playground. These are how we do our behaviors. And you can make these yourself. You can do poster contests, meme contests. It doesn't have to be store-bought ordered, but you can also just order these. Lots of companies online make these for you. Here's one for a cafeteria for a school that was the Eagles. It can be themed and color-coded for your school. All right. Also, you can do sandwich boards for parents, how to drop off and pick up. We got to teach behaviors to parents too. So we're going to just quickly go through. We only have 10 more minutes, but when you work with your staff, I think it's good to have a discussion about what are challenges to being consistent and what systems that they've seen work in the past. You have a wealth of information in your own school of people that have worked other places. PBIS is 30 years old. So you probably, or maybe it's 20, something like that, 25 is around the mid 90s. So do your math. People have come to your school and have done it before, and getting another staff member to stand up in a staff meeting and say, yeah, at my old school we did this, this, and this, and it was super smooth, is gold. Then it's not top down coming from the principal, okay? So that's just a tip for implementation. When you teach expectations, remember, we can't say they should know by now, multiple examples. If you can teach it on location, that's the best way, but you also can do videos. There's a lot of fun videos online of PBIS lessons. Um, those of you who have time, look up No Tardy Man. That was a high school video that we made in my school district that won the Film Festival Award for PBIS about not being tardy. He's a superhero who's always on time, and the kids made it. So very cool things. Give kids lots of opportunity to practice, lots of positive feedback. It should be modeled. All the grown-ups should be involved. So if you have yard supervisors, campus supervisors, the lunch lady, they should teach the lesson with the adult standing next to them, like the teacher, saying, yeah, what she said. That transfers authority from the teacher to these classified staff that often the kids will be like, you're not my teacher, right? I shouldn't have to listen to you. If you have the principal or the teacher standing next to these individuals, then they teach it. And that's powerful, right? Because you're transferring authority and they're the ones who are going to be there to correct the behavior when it goes wrong. So you need them to do the teaching as much as you can. So here, we're learning how to play recess games. That's one big thing I saw after coming back after COVID. Kids did not know how to play any games. You have to teach them to play Foursquare, teach them to do tetherball, teach them how things work, how to solve a problem when it goes wrong, rock, paper, scissors, right? They don't even know how to do this stuff anymore. Teach through circles. Deep discussions about cell phones is very powerful. Why do we do what we do? Let kids feel like they're contributing to the rules you make. And really with your staffs, engage them in a discussion about how are they teaching things. Let them share with each other what's working, what's not working. And then the next piece is positive reinforcement. So this can be sticky for people. There are a group of folks that think, there was a book that came out called Punished by Rewards in the 70s by Alfie Kohn, and it got people thinking that extrinsic rewards were bad. And that is not true. Research has been very clear that that's not true, that extrinsic is very much a valid way to teach new things. So in your handout, I have a nice kind of frequently asked questions right here. So you'll see that when you want to answer those questions for your staff as we get into teaching these things, and I have a nice 10-minute video that you can show your staff about setting up positive reinforcement systems. Mainly the idea is we have to start learning occurs with extrinsic before it becomes intrinsic. So yes, you can fade them eventually, but when you need to teach new behaviors, extrinsic rewards are really powerful. Extrinsic rewards also provide a lot of opportunity for positive connections between people. Kids don't necessarily become, dependent upon those things, especially if you fade them over time. And you don't have to spend any money, right? Like kids actually tend to prefer no cost rewards that bond them to their school, like activities, privileges, sitting in their teacher's chair for the day, choosing the music at lunchtime on Friday. Kids actually prefer those than getting a sniffy pencil from the student store. So you actually don't need to spend more money on this than you can be. And when we implemented it in my school district, it was during the recession. We had no money. So we had to learn how to do all these things without that. And research is really clear that middle and high school students, their brain is a little bit different, like we talked about with low serotonin and things like that, that when they've done brain scans on getting extrinsic positive rewards, that if they did a study where they handed a piece of candy for accomplishing a task to someone in their 20s, and they did the same thing for people between 12 and 17 years old, and the people in their 20s, their brain lit up like, woohoo, I got a Snickers bar. And the adolescent brain went, little flicker. And what ended up happening is people have misinterpreted that adolescents don't need any of this. But the truth is that they actually need more in order to get their brain to light up in that way. And also further brain studies have shown that adolescents are at a particular point in their neurology that they do not respond to warnings and threats. I don't really know why that is. If you think about survival and Darwin and hunters and gatherers, why would we have especially high risk taking behavior in people that wouldn't respond to warnings at adolescents? But That's how it is. So you actually can't really motivate adolescent behavior with warnings. Those of you who work with adolescents, you know this. It doesn't help. You lecture all day and it doesn't change their behavior, right? Rewards are a much better way to go with like keeping it positive, showing a lot of, but they do respond really well to personal attention, things like that. They actually want your attention, even though they act like they don't. Um, so, what doesn't work? Lifeguarding, looking at spaces and saying, that's wrong, and that's wrong, pointing out the negative. What's awful about it is that's how your brain works. Your brain works thinking, let me look at the danger, and this is wrong. But research shows the opposite effect. So, the more you point out what's wrong, the more of those behaviors you get. The more that you point out the positive, the more of those behaviors you get. 80% better behavior by sticking with the positive. And if you need to correct a behavior, you always pull them aside and do it privately. We do not announce it to the whole group, right? Because then they're getting attention for it. So that's what the research shows. So positive behavioral practices is everything from positive contact, how you interact with kids, and positive reinforcement. So you should be walking around and talking to kids, and I like your shoes, and I saw you in the soccer game, and you worked really hard today, right? Unconditional positive regard with contact, and then positive reinforcement. So here I am, positive contact. I like this kid no matter what, but also those 4-to-1 positives, right? For every correction that we give. And those can be things like a ticket system at your school. So think about developing that this year and make those things like redeemable for something because we want to increase the likelihood that they're going to continue those behaviors. Group reinforcements are very powerful, like class rewards, grade level rewards, team points, stuff like that. And some examples of what you can do. There we go. Next, school-wide systems, keep it simple. So we'll do more training on this, but this is like a simple ticket goes into a box, drawing on a Friday in the office. There's a spinner that if their name gets drawn, they get to take, something from the spinner or a menu of positive rewards. Here's an individual classroom system where kids are all earning positives. This is a system for an elementary where every classroom gets a drawing on a Friday from the principal and it's announced over the PA. Student of the month, teacher of the month, they're lovely. It's not frequent enough typically. So those are a lot of work. And you're taking pictures and this and that, but it's really not frequent enough for you to see an impact. So you can do things like tangibles, like sniffy pencils and candy, but kids do tend to like things like they can earn things like staff versus student soccer game. Or you can do things like a dance party on a Friday and they get to like DJ and they get to pick the 5 songs for Friday. Pizza parties, these are for older kids, and do not forget adults. So if you want to increase adults giving out positives, then every time you draw that name for the kid, the adult gets something too, right? So it's really, that also helps for people that say that they don't think that we should have positive reinforcement anymore. Start giving it to the adults and they're going to see how much they like it. So this is sort of the homework that you have cut out for you for this year. I didn't get into the last thing, which is correcting behavior, but we'll get there. You need to start with these first 3 first. Anytime you think problem behavior, it's off the hook, ask yourself, have we been clear with expectations? Have we taught it directly to the kids? And do we have a positive reinforcement system to make sure that those behaviors become integrated in what we do? In your handout, I have a no-cost rewards list of all these fun things that don't cost a thing and will increase the bond that student has with you. And that is a great place to start. So you do have a little bit of homework in there. This is kind of that work cut out for you for the year to try to get these at least 3 things started at your school would be great. Okay, I want to hand it over to Maggie. I want to honor your time. And Maggie, is there any thoughts, feedback, directions that you would like people to know moving forward with this? It's kind of a tall order, but this was a brief overview of, I think, a training many of you attended last summer.
Yes, I thank you very much. Thank you. I thought this was great information. What I would ask each team, as you hopefully have a little bit more time to work with, to stay together today, is just kind of reflect on today and next steps. And I'm going to send an email. And Laura, I think we have you on the 8th. Is that correct?
Is
I
it the
thought,
6th or let me look.
okay.
It's in I'm coming back in December.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yep.
I think talk with your teams, and I will email principals just kind of feedback from today, feedback on what your team is, next steps are.
But
Yes.
our goal is really like get you guys like trained up so that you can lead your teams,
Yes.
your schools, your whole school. And we have other resources. I have a video series that you can use that kind of lays all of this out more in depth, but they're only like 10 to 12 minutes each that you could turn and show to your staff at a staff meeting. So it's not all on your shoulders to remember everything I just said. So that's like, we want this really doable for you.
And Laura, how would they get access to what videos would maybe pertain?
So I'm going to be well, you and I will work, but we're going to
Okay.
basically what's going to happen is the school principal or whoever the designated person at the site, we're going to get them enrolled. It's an online course.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
they will have the whole scope and sequence. They're going to have all the materials that have like discussion questions for your staff, all the handouts for your staff. Everything's packaged nicely. And then you are going to be able to simply hit, press play. And then at the end of the video, you're going to turn and like do the activity with your staff. And by the end of it, there's going to be 8 lessons. And you will be implementing PBIS by the end of the year as you do those things. And I will work with each of you guys individually to help you know, like, which one do we want to do next and what do we want to do with our staff. And this is our particular situation. This recording, I'm going to, we'll be able to post for you for the other sites. And then those of you that want to have it and like use it again, you'll be able to do that as well.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. All right. Thank you all for your time.
For more information, go to lauramooiman.com where you can download free resources, watch free training videos, check out my online courses, and connect with me there.